Evening. I would like to welcome you all to special session webinar series of Women's Stories of Survival, Innovation, Resilience, and Development. As a part of this series, today's webinar would be focusing on sharing stories of resource scarcity, security, and sustainability of South Asian women. My name is Nimisha. I work as Knowledge Engagement and Public Engagement Coordinator with the Avoidable Deaths Network. I'm based out of New Delhi, India. Also sharing our email ID here. So if there are any further queries or concerns or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Before we proceed ahead, a few housekeeping rules for all of us. Please ensure that your microphones are muted at all times. If you have any question or comment, feel free to use the chat box. This special session will be recorded, and I hope that's fine with everybody. Also, turn off your cameras in case you do not wish to be seen. Also, this session, as we'll be progressing further, it's pretty tight. So we are going to time each section by our team. So our team is going to be timing the sections. And today, the discussion and the question and answers will be moderated by Dr. Insha Malik. So without any further delay, I would like to pass it on to Dr. Nimra for the introductions. Over to you, Dr. Nimra.
Thank you, Nimisha. Can everybody hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Yeah. So I am Nimra Iqbal. I am a medical doctor, and I am from Pakistan. And right now I'm doing my master's in public health from AUT. I am affiliated with ADN as a knowledge exchange for public engagement coordinator. And today I would be introducing our moderator, our speakers and our coordinators. So I first of all I would like to introduce Dr. Nivedita Ray Bennett, who is the founding president and the convener of ADN. Dr. Nivedita leads the development and implementation of strategy for ADN's growth, public engagement activities, raises grants, produces the newsletters, bulletins, line manages the operations team, initiates and leads novel networks. Dr. Nivedita is an associate professor in risk management based at the University of Leicester School of Business. She is the program director for MSc in risk, crisis, and disaster management. She is a social scientist specializing in disaster risk reduction and international development at the interface with public health. Over to you, Dr. Nivedita, for your...
Thank you, Nimra. Can I have my slides up? Okay. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. Welcome once again. And my name is Nivedita Ray Bennett. And I think Nimra has given a detailed introduction about me. So without any further delay, we can move on to the next one. Next slide, please. So today's session is fantastic. And I just want to welcome our speakers, Professor Deepthi Wickramasinghe, Bihanga Amarakun, Ashmita Thapa, Debolina Roy, and Damitri. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and I think it's going to be an absolutely amazing special session, and we all are looking forward to listening to you. So we can move to the next one. So my presentation is all about, introducing ADN in brief. So ADN is a diverse, dynamic, inclusive global membership network of experts, practitioners, and researchers interested in avoiding human deaths from natural hazards, naturally triggered technological hazards, and human-made hazards, largely in the low and middle-income countries. ADN was founded by me and Hideki Shiroshita, based in Kansai University, and was launched in 2019 at the 4th Summit of the Global Alliance for Disaster Risk Institutes in Kyoto, in Japan. Now, we are often misunderstood as an NGO. So ADN is not an NGO, not a trust, not a foundation. It's a network. It's a network which is based in Kansai University in Japan and Leicester University in the UK. Unfortunately, Hideyuki is not here today. He's a bit busy with various things, but he has extended his thanks to all the speakers and the participants for this special session. Now, Leicester University offers a flexible, if we could stay with that slide, please, the previous one. Yeah, thank you very much. So Leicester University provides flexible learning program called MSc in Risk, Crisis and Disaster Management. It has got 2 intakes, which is April and October. So if you are interested, please feel free to get in touch with me. Otherwise, we have lots of information on the website. Kansai University offers a suite of BA and BSc in safety science programs. They even have undergraduates and postgraduates. So, you know, if you want to find out more about these courses, you can always contact Hideyuki directly. We can move to the next one now. So what is ADN's purpose? So ADN's purpose is to help policymakers, practitioners, and researchers to make better decisions to save lives and reduce injuries to achieve sustainable development. Our purpose, and also our purpose is aligned that, it's very much with the Sendai framework and sustainable development goals, but I will talk a bit later on that. But otherwise, our vision is to become a global thought leader on disaster deaths for impactful research, solutions, and innovations. And we hope to achieve this by 2030. So what are we doing to achieve that? So we can move on to the next slide. So ADN does a number of activities, and they can be described in these 4 different activities that ADN does. So due to constraint of time, I shan't be going through the details of all these 8 activities, but I think I want to draw your attention on 2 specific activities which are relevant to the special sessions. So which are basically the knowledge exchange events. So we can move on to the next one. So I think, no, sorry, if you could stay back with the previous one. Yeah, thank you. So we launched our special session first on 4th December 2020 at the International Conference on Geographical Science for Resilient Communities. It's also known as Gorilla Conference in Makerere University in Uganda. And today's session is the 14th special session. Over these years, over this past 2 years, we have been traveling in different countries, continents, institutions, hosting this kind of special session webinars. The aim of the special sessions webinars are twofold. First, they are knowledge exchange and engagement webinars delivered virtually to the public for free. And the second aim is to raise awareness of those deaths that are often not on the mainstream agenda of policymakers, practitioners, and even academia. Now, today's session is not so much on avoidable death, but perhaps more on the indirect aspects of avoidable deaths. But in the past, we have had sessions which directly focuses on avoidable deaths. So we can move to the next one. And the other thing that the Avoidable Deaths Network started to promote, the knowledge and awareness about avoidable deaths is by launching a global campaign, which we launched on 12th March in Japan. And we call this global campaign as the International Awareness Day for Avoidable Deaths. And it's going to be celebrated annually on 12th March. So we would like you to, if you're interested, please feel free to follow our global campaign, celebrate our global campaign, and raise awareness of indirect disaster deaths and missing persons. So these are the 2 focus of the global campaign: indirect disaster deaths and missing persons, and also to understand the causes and circumstances that lead to deaths. So we have a dedicated website for the global campaign. So please feel free to, look up and find out a little bit more about our global campaign. That would be fantastic. These are some amazing pictures of our global campaign launch, which took place in March on 12th. It was, the global campaign was announced by Ms. Mami Mizutore, Special Representative of Secretary General of UNDRR, and she's also the head of UNDRR. So it was really nice. It's a lovely pictures. And our global campaign slogan is disaster deaths are avoidable. So we have a couple of graphics. If you go up on our website, you will be able to download them, use them as a stamp, so on and so forth. Okay. And here's at the bottom is a website link. So you can follow our global campaign. We can move on to the next one. Yeah, so the purpose of the global campaign, as I said, is fourfold. Number one is to raise the visibility of indirect disaster deaths and missing persons. Second, to capture the causes and circumstances that lead to deaths, and also to promote the global campaign where we are saying that disaster deaths are avoidable, and they're avoidable through three important activities. Number one is through preventative measures. Second, through putting amenable measures in place. And finally, having an effective disaster risk governance. All three together can play a vital role in reducing avoidable disaster deaths. So we have, guidance for campaigners handbook. So there we have explained the framework. It's there on the website of our global campaign. You can download it. And finally, this global campaign's idea is also to really appreciate, the value of the lives that have been saved. And also, we anticipate that through this global campaign, we will be able to contribute in reducing the actual number of disaster deaths. We can move to the next one. Yeah, and I think through all these activities, the 8 activities, the global campaign, we aim to contribute to the Sendai Framework's Target A, which is reducing disaster deaths by 2030. And the second is about reducing the number of people affected by disasters, which is the indirect deaths by 2030. And these 2 targets, A and B, work in interface with Sustainable Development Goals, such as 11, 13, and 17. We can move on to the next one. Yes, and I think that's it. If you have not joined ADN, you may consider joining ADN, and my colleague, so one of the ADN colleagues will drop this link on how to join ADN. So it takes literally a few seconds to join ADN. And I'm also very pleased to let you know that, it's about a year and a half ago, we have joined the UNDRR Sendai Voluntary Commitment Platform, which is led by UNDRR Kobe office in Japan. So we have a page up there on Sendai Voluntary Commitment. If you want to remain up to date about ADN's activities, this is another website that you can follow us, and we provide annual report to the Sendai Voluntary Commitment Platform. I think with that note, thank you very much. What we will do now, so our special sessions get evaluated. It's just capturing the impact. So we will run 2 polls. So the first poll we will run now, and the second one will be after the last speaker. So with that note, so I'm going to invite Lauren. So Lauren, I invite you now formally to launch the first poll, please. And our target is 80% response rate. So if you could kindly, click one of the boxes. It's only 2 questions. It shouldn't take long. The first question is, do you have any prior knowledge of the topics introduced in this session? And second is, based on your current knowledge that is up to the point of starting this session, please rate your current level of confidence on the usefulness of the topic introduced. Okay. Lauren, I can't see the responses, so maybe you could probably let me know whether we are reaching our target of 80% or not.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
We have 65%. So we have our speakers, so they won't be participating in the poll. So it might be less than 80%. We have 69%.
Maybe another few, let us give a few more seconds. So may I encourage everybody, please, including some of the ADN members can also take part.
Someone has received an error during submission.
Not sure why. Do you know why?
No, there's no errors on this end. 70% response.
70%, okay. A little bit more? What's the, okay. Right, so 40%, 47%, a little less than a majority, thinks that they have prior knowledge of the topics. Let's see the next one. Okay, not at all confident, 11%. Moderately confident, 21%. Somewhat confident is 42%. Okay, we shall see what happens after the after we've listened to all our speakers. So I think, Lauren, so we got 73%, okay? So not 80%. Well, we'll have to go with that. That's fine. Oh, 76%. So maybe 4 more percent. So come on. This is fantastic. This is promising. So I'm happy to give another couple of seconds. 70. So yeah, maybe 2 more seconds. Can we hit the 80% target? Right, so it's not moving up at all. So I think we can close the poll, Lauren. Make sure you take a screenshot for evaluation purposes. You can share results now. Can everybody see the results?
Yeah.
They're being shared.
That's great. Thank you very much. So I think with that note, yeah, thank you very much. Over to Nimra.
Thank you, Dr. Nivedita, and thank you, Lauren. Now I would like to introduce one of the facilitators of this session, Professor Deepthi Wickramasinghe, who is affiliated with the South Asian Alliance of Disaster Research Institutes, SAADRI, Sri Lankan chapter, and University of Colombo. Dr. Deepthi is a senior professor in zoology and environment sciences at University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. She considers herself an interdisciplinary human environment scholar trained as an ecologist and socio-environmental scientist. Her research spans broad and connected areas that include biodiversity, ecosystem, ecology, climate change adaptations, disaster risk reduction, nature-based solutions, and gender. She has contributed to many national, regional, and global level panels on biodiversity conservation, integrated natural resource management, sustainable development, and social resilience. So Dr. Deepthi would first introduce her organization, and then she would be our first speaker for this session. So over to you, Dr. Deepthi.
You're muted, Deepthi.
Sorry. Thank you very much, everybody. Hello and welcome. As spoke now, I'm one of the speakers and facilitators today, and thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are going to tell you some stories about resource scarcity, security, and sustainability of South Asian women. And why South Asia? Because South Asia is highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. More than half of the areas in the countries in Sri Lanka, countries in the region, or 750 million people across the countries, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, are having many impacts by one or more climate-related disasters in the last 20 years. We were impacted very heavily. Now, this number is only set to grow as temperature continue to increase, which change the atmosphere and the global climate. Researchers suggest that global South will suffer most from the climate change, and that the South Asian region will be one of the hardest hit regions in the world. So the climate change is predicted to displace 62 million South Asian people by 2050. That means it's us. And then why women? Women are particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and it affects women disproportionately during different extreme events and disasters. Let's look into the region. In the current climate, we can see a warming by 1.2 degrees Celsius since pre-industrial times due to human activities. I will give some examples. In Bangladesh, Dhaka, that was in April 2023, Dhaka observed the highest maximum temperature recorded in decades. It was 40.6 degrees Celsius. That was the 15th April, that is last month. Again, in India, several northern and eastern cities recorded the maximum temperatures about 44 degrees Celsius on the 18th April. That was a record. Similarly, Thailand recorded its highest ever temperature in the century, that is 45.4 on the 15th April in the city of Tak. So what's happening? Isn't this alarming? So I'm from Sri Lanka. As we discussed, today is a very, very hot day. So we feel it's like 40, but the actual temperature is 35 degrees Celsius. That is again one of the highest temperatures recorded. So the climate change in Sri Lanka is an important issue, and it affects many segments, including women. Against this backdrop, we as a member of the University of Colombo and SAADRI, I'm very happy to welcome you all for this today's session. And I know after this session, you will have different opinions about the impacts of climate change on women, resource scarcity, security, and sustainability. I'm representing the South Asian Alliance of Disaster Research Institute, that is SAADRI. SAADRI aims to deepen the understanding of disasters in especially the South Asian region. And we deal with the climate change impacts, learn from evidence-based lessons. We investigate and resolve implementation challenges to achieve better resilience, infrastructure and technology adoption systems, improved livelihood of people, and promote societal safety culture by integrating knowledge and skills and technologies. So SAADRI is a platform for alliance partners to seek collective contributions toward regional need for disaster risk reduction and climate change-induced resilience. And again, I'm representing the University of Colombo. University of Colombo is the largest and the oldest university in Sri Lanka, and maybe one of the region. We were founded in 1921, and our motto is Buddhi Sarvastra Brajante, that is the wisdom in life. So it is our duty to impart the knowledge among the needed sectors. So having this very short note, I would like you to enjoy the rest of the session and stay connected. Can I now move to my presentation, please?
Yeah,
Lauren?
yeah. Thank you, Dr. Deepthi.
Okay, I would like to. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to share my slides. Hope everybody can see the slides.
Yes, we can.
Hello. Okay, thank you very much. My topic today is climate change adaptation and the role of women in Sri Lanka. I would like to start by saying this is an injustice. This is one of the greatest injustices of our time, the climate change. Because those who have contributed least to global emissions, that is the greenhouse gases, are hit very hardest by the effects of climate change. That means us. We in the developing world have done nothing wrong. So this is very This, you can't justify this. So the plight of developing economies and small island states are very serious because changing climate, frequent natural climate-linked disasters, rising temperatures, and sea level rises are experiencing everywhere in the South Asian region. Coming back to Sri Lanka, the share of the global greenhouse gas emissions by Sri Lanka is only 0.08%. But the climate vulnerability index ranking, we are at 104th position. And by 2030, we have to reduce our greenhouse gases by 14.5%. So this is why at the beginning I told that this is very, you can't justify this. I would say the climate crisis is not gender neutral. It is very, very gender sensitive. Gender inequality means that women and girls are more vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So the climate change poses threats to the environment, natural resources, which ultimately affect the socio-economic fabric, health, and well-being of women. I would now like to connect some dots, and I would give only some examples due to time limitations. The rural community that is very dependent on natural resources made increasingly scarce by climate change. Why? Because due to climate change, the environment is changing, the atmosphere is changing, which affects the global cycles, including the water cycle, which sometimes gives rise to many natural disasters such as floods, thunderstorms, droughts, and sea level rise, erosion, and the marginalized people and rural communities are very much vulnerable. And then against this backdrop, women may be forced to utilize scarce natural resources, including water, land, and biodiversity for the living and to look after their families. On top of this, there could be cultural barriers and economic stressors on women, poverty, and gender norms. I mean, we can see this in many communities across states, across countries in South Asia. This would be an additional burden on women. I will take only two examples. Rising temperatures and accelerated or increased rainfall make living harder for women, because women is the person who look after the family, who cooks, who washes, who cleans, and everything. So because the resources are getting scarcer, water resources, for example, are getting depleted. So women have to go to seek water. This is from Sri Lanka. What you can see here is from Sri Lanka, because in certain arid areas, they don't have water. So there are some supplies. Sometimes they have to buy water. So that is the role of women. So she needs to go behind these vendors to get water for the household activities. This prevents her from participating in other economic and community activities. She may even have to take her own children, as you can see from here. Most likely her daughters out of school to help. So working out in the agriculture fields under these conditions, under droughts, extreme temperatures, could be very, very harsh, especially for pregnant females and those with children. You can see from this picture, when a climate-related disaster hits, such as floods, women are more likely to die than men. You can see a pregnant lady and a lady carrying a child. They are struggling. More time spent indoors puts them at greater risk. Male relatives are outside with better option to find safety. And so one known example is boys are more likely to be taught to swim in these rural societies and climb trees than girls. So girls and women are in danger because they need to wait till help comes, because they don't have these basic skills in their lives. Similarly, another example is disaster-related water scarcity. Women and girls are then more likely to suffer from food shortages because of the less agricultural production, water scarcity, and poor hygiene. Now, the hygienic aspects should be very unique to women, especially the women in adolescent age and women, the pregnant and lactating women. They need a special provision of water for their biological needs. But the climate change induced water scarcity and increased temperature would definitely harm them. Similarly, due to frequent droughts, hunger hotspots could be everywhere because lack of harvest and poor quality food would be unavoidable. So this makes mothers helpless. Coming back to Sri Lanka, around 28% of Sri Lanka's population depends on livelihoods that are connected to agriculture. Any agricultural activity is highly dependent on climate conditions such as rain on time, the temperature, the humidity, and everything. So if these are being disturbed by the climate change, the harvest would be low. Women working in the outdoors at the same time will be affected more due to the increased temperature. If you go today, even today, to the rural villages, you can see people covering their entire body, the women covering their entire body, working in the field because of the heat. So impacts on agriculture will place the food security of the entire population at risk. And the ultimate responsibility will come to the poor mother. They will be affected too. Having said that, can we find climate smart women? Being a climate smart woman, how far from reality? Now I would like to move to the next section of my presentation, advancing climate action and adaptations. What I feel, what I have seen from our research and our community outreach work is women need capacities developed to cope up with, to be climate smart. So let's be climate smart. I would take only two examples here. One is agriculture and livelihood. We have to help everybody to eliminate hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. For that, we need sustainable and climate smart agriculture. We need to introduce crop varieties or to develop varieties and breeds which can tolerate heat, drought, and floods, or even insect pest attacks to have a better harvest. And we need to manage water in an efficient way using water efficient farming methods such as micro-irrigation, reuse of wastewater, or on-farm rainwater harvesting. And then we need to develop a system for timely issuing and communicating of climate information to women farmers. Because most of the time that we see some information do not reach women or the farmers, marginalized people, because they are sometimes only on the TVs and Facebook and other WhatsApp groups. Sometimes they won't read the essential information, won't reach the most needed people. We have to think of promoting sustainable agriculture to enhance the resilience of crops, animals, and other protein producers such as fish, and as well as agroecosystems. Another serious problem is the intrusion of salt water in the low-lying coastal areas, which will devastate the paddy fields and other cultivations. With the increase in temperature and droughts and sea level rise, this would be more prominent in the near future. At the same time, we need to increase the efficiency of use of water and reduce the unnecessary water losses from the agricultural irrigation water systems. And another very easily done example is to support women to be self-sufficient with easily grown nutrient crops in the backyard, because in Sri Lanka, we have some leafy vegetables which can supplement vitamins and essential proteins such as, I don't know the English terms, it's kind of spinach and moringa, which can be easily cultivated in the backyard. So women need support, women need help to get engaged in that kind of coping up work. So the need of the day is the efficient networks among women who can learn from each other and information sharing among women, because in each area of Sri Lanka, we have a very strong community groups. So among these community groups, I suggest what we should do is to enhance communication and networking among women. My second example is gender-sensitive emergency sanitation. As all of us know, after a post-emergency or post-disaster situation, most of the people, the victims, are being taken into a temporary shelter, right? But here again, this is from our research. What we have found is we have to pay attention to the biological needs and social aspects of women and the girl children, because in these, as you can see from here in this hole, it's just a temporary shelter, right? Just people are being forced to live there for several days or several weeks, especially during flood and landslide disasters. So there are issues related to safety and privacy of these women and children. There are no places for the women to be safe and for the lactating mothers to feed their children. And there are psychological aspects as well, because girls especially, they feel discomfort and shame to talk about menstrual hygiene issues, which are not very much addressed during emergency shelters, and they are reluctant to request help. What I suggest here is to include women in decision-making platforms and take them as a stakeholder in emergency management planning. Having said that, coming back to solutions, women should be empowered to cope up with increased temperature, sea level rise, disasters, and other impacts of the climate change. For that, we need a very strengthened capacity building programs for women to be self-protective, early warning system for disasters, so that women know that what's going to happen, then they can get prepared themselves. And proper urban planning. Nature-based solutions can do a lot to conserve and restoring ecosystems as an adaptive measure. In one of our studies, we found that near the wetlands, the average temperature is less than 1 to 2 degrees Celsius than the rest of the land. So having greener landscape in every area, connected wetland networks, connected forest networks could be one of the solutions to get ourselves adapted to the increased temperature. So women can play a good role there if they are given opportunities. But we have some luck as well. Sri Lankan women, among Sri Lankan women, the literacy rate is very high. We have a very high life expectancy, and women have access to healthcare with acceptable quality. So what we need today is the leadership, soft skills, and capacity development. And I believe this is the time for us to change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Deepthi, for an amazing presentation highlighting the vulnerability of women to impacts of climate change. For the participants, I would urge you to write your questions in the chat box, and our speakers would be answering them at the end of the talks in the question answer session. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Vihanga Amarakun, who is an assistant lecturer attached to the Department of Zoology and Environment Sciences in the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka. She holds an honors degree in Environment Sciences from the University of Colombo. Her research area is disaster risk reduction and the community perception on floods. Over to you, Vihanga.
I hope you can see the screen.
Yes,
we can see Vihanga.
All right. So thank you for the introduction. So yes, I'm Vihanga Amarapul, assistant lecturer from University of Colombo. So the topic I'll be discussing today would be floods and the associated psychological issues of women in Sri Lanka. So moving ahead, so to talk about the floods, to get an understanding about the local situation in Sri Lanka. So floods can be considered as the most common source of disaster loss And when taken the local context, the Sri Lanka context, Sri Lanka has a moderate exposure to flooding, that it has been ranked 56th out of 191 countries in the world. And when considering the time period from 1974 to 2004, floods have been increasingly recorded in Sri Lanka. And of course, the climate change-driven events like floods and the landslide, they are predicted to be increased in the future. And especially with these metropolitan areas of Sri Lanka like Ratnapura and Kalutara, these administrative districts being subjected to development activities has caused for more frequent floods. So I will be displaying a small video about the flood event that happened in 2017 in Sri Lanka. So which is the most disastrous flood event that took place in the recent history. All right, so that was about the 2017 flood event that occurred in Sri Lanka, which caused for a huge amount of socio-economic impacts. So when considering a flood event, usually the most obvious impacts that can be seen or that can be recorded are the socio-economic impact. That means the number of deaths, the number of injuries, which can be like which are related to the humans, and then of course the damage to the infrastructure and property. That means to the houses, industries, and then damage to the livestock and the livelihood of people. So all these are counted as the socio-economic impacts, which are mostly obvious. But when it comes to the other impacts that comes along with the socio-economic impacts, the psychological impacts are very rarely discussed. But mostly these socio-economic impacts cause for the occurrence of the psychological impacts in floods. So when taken commonly, usually we can see some common psychological impacts of floods. So anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, such. So there's a list here. So usually we know when there's a flood event, people are forced to some kind of a risky environment. And because of floods, they have to go for the relief camps, and sometimes their houses are inundated, their loving ones may be dead, or sometimes they are injured. Therefore, they undergo a numerous amount of psychological stress. So therefore, these impacts can occur within them, but they are very rarely discussed, especially with related to the Sri Lankan context. So now, the big question. Now, there has been some kind of discussion whether women are more vulnerable to the psychological impacts than men. So yes, according to the literature, women are made more vulnerable than men for the psychological impacts of floods. So now I'm going to explain why. So basically, we can categorize all these reasons for these psychological impacts under three main topics. So they are, I will be discussing in the upcoming slides. So rigid gender beliefs and roles of women. So when I say the roles of women, obviously since the Stone Age, women have been trained to a specific role, which is becoming a caregiver, and basically caring for the children, the elders, and the sick within the community. So that has been the role of the women since a very long time in the evolutionary history. So now, even nowadays, we can see that, and even during a hazardous time, people expect the women to be the caregivers. So according to a study done in Australia, the women have ranked their own necessities or their own needs lastly compared to the children, elders, and the sick. That means they do not prioritize their needs when it even comes to a flood situation. And also, in some communities, especially if this is related to Sri Lanka as well, obviously. So even because in some communities that women have less exposure, that especially with some cultural barriers, they are not allowed to participate in social bonding and social events. So especially with related to emergency planning and stuff. So therefore they have very less awareness about the early warning systems, and therefore they have they are very prone to the flood impacts. And then also there are some extreme places like a need of protecting the female virtue. So it has become more important than accessing the flood relief services. So basically we can see such extreme cases as well, even in the Sri Lankan society. And then discriminatory policies and practices against women. So basically we know that most of the South Asian countries, including Sri Lanka, has a patriarchal practice or patriarchal system in our society. That means most of the time father is the head of the family. And then always when it comes to decision making, finances, and arranging the emergency management, in all these activities, men are involved. Therefore, the priorities or the necessities of women are not taken into the front. Therefore, usually the needs of the women are not that much considered in making the emergency management plans. And then lack of property ownership, because in most of the countries, including Sri Lanka, that women are not given the property ownership, that most of the times the men in the family handle the property. And then domestic violence. This is one of the other impacts of floods. Basically, we know during even COVID-19 that people were kind of confined within their homes. And even during flood situation, sometimes they stay in their own homes or sometimes they move into relief camps. So within these places, domestic violence happens. So due to domestic violence also, the psychological impacts or the psychological stress increases in women. And then lack of women's leadership in socio-economic and political environment. So this is very obvious in Sri Lanka. So basically when we consider the population, the current population of Sri Lanka, nearly 52% is females, the women. But when we take the parliament, which is the national decision-making body of the country, nearly only 2% of female representation can be seen. So it represents high. That means most of the time the male dominance can be seen in this political and decision-making roles. Therefore, the women's rights and women's needs are quite neglected. And also there's a gendered belief that means that exists since a very long time, that women are not capable of having leadership positions and decision-making skills. But because of that, the society tends to give the woman a caregiver role and set her aside, and because of that she is being excluded from the political and the community disaster management plan. And then some solutions and recommendations can be taken for all the psychological impacts due to the flood events for women. So these are kind of designed under the goal number 5 of Sustainable Development Goals, gender equality and women's empowerment. So having a gender lens in disaster management is important. That means because we know now women are more vulnerable to these psychological impacts than men. Therefore, it is okay to have a gender lens, a gender-based opinion in disaster management. And also giving some leadership role for women when dealing with this disaster management, because they have lived with this experience. Therefore, having some role for them in disaster management is important. And having some funds and allocating budget for gender-based research in flood management. And then having more strong legislation against gender discrimination. And then providing economic support to women and household is also important, because if women are economically independent, so they can face the disasters without any fear or without depending on men. And the role of indigenous practices, because this is a part of my undergraduate research project. So basically, I talk with people who annually deal with the flood events in the Ratnapura district. So these are some quite good examples that how they have adapted. Like from the Wickramasinghe's presentation, we saw about how adaptation works. So here, these are some good examples that how the people in the river basin, the Colombo River basin, in Sri Lanka have adapted for the floods annually. And these are very helpful in for women as well, because they are the ones who are staying at home most of the time. So having an upper floor in the house, so they don't have to move into a relief camp. So you can see in this image as well. So they stay in the upper floor during the floods without moving to a relief camp. So at least they are in their usual place. So the psychological impacts are reduced. And having less furniture on the ground floor, so the damage is reduced. Having life jackets, and then also life-saving boards are important for disaster preparedness and reducing the impacts. And then having electric switches above the water level, so it reduces the accidents. And then to summarize my presentation today, so what I discussed today was that the Sri Lankan situation of floods, basically, so Sri Lanka is extremely prone to floods, and the socio-economic impacts are very obvious. And then one of such major flood events occurred in Sri Lanka during 2017. And the socio-economic impacts are quite elaborated, but the psychological impacts of such major flood events are rarely discussed. And according to the literature, women are more vulnerable to the psychological impacts of floods, and several reasons can be identified, and then solutions and recommendations can be proposed under Sustainable Development Goals. So here are my references. And just before I finish my presentation, just a small message for all the women out there. In a society that says, put yourself last, self-love and self-acceptance are revolutionary. So loving yourself, accepting yourself, and prioritizing yourself is not selfish. It's about it's about acquiring your rights and getting your proper place in the society. And women deserve their place. Then women deserve the prioritization. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vihanga, for your very interesting talk on highlighting the impacts of floods on the mental health of women survivors. Now, I would like to introduce our next speaker, who is an emerging research scholar joining us all the way from Nepal, Ashmita. Ashmita Thapamagar holds a bachelor's in public health with a minor in development studies, and also a candidate for master's in disaster management. Over to you, Ashmita, for your talk.
I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Nimra introduced me, I am Ashmita Thapamagar from Nepal. I will not be introducing myself a lot, but I will be talking about my presentation. So I used to be a teacher. I just took a break from my teaching just to focus on my master's. And after completing my master's, I will be going back to teaching if possible. And let's move forward to my presentation. I'll be sharing my screen now. Can you all see my screen? I guess.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so my topic for today is role of women empowerment in disaster risk reduction and emergency response in Nepal. Moving forward, we all know that disasters have been taking place in the world since the world itself started, right? And because of the ongoing evolution, we have experienced, we have heard about a lot of disasters that have been going around the world. To take a name, earthquake, tropical storms and floods, tsunami, wildfires, and volcanic eruptions are one of the most prominent disasters around the world. And around 45,000 deaths are recorded annually, and the reason for death are natural disasters. So overall, in the count of deaths, we can see that 0.1% of deaths were caused by natural disasters. Seeing a record for the year 2022, 31,000 deaths were recorded, where $330 million were lost, economic loss. And developing countries, people are more vulnerable to these disasters and their impacts because a lot of developing countries are situated in the fault lines, including Nepal itself. And because a lot of people residing in these developing countries, they do not have access to a lot of healthcare facilities, more information. That is why we can see that these developing countries people are more vulnerable, and when a disaster strikes, a lot of death counts as well as economic loss are recorded. In the context of Nepal, Nepal has not been untouchable from any kind of disasters, being in a very much, subtropical, so not subtropical, being a very topographically diverse country. Nepal has, lower lands from sea level to the highest peak that is above 8,000 meters. So Nepal is a federal democratic republic, and it has had its own sanctions of disaster management acts, but even after going through a lot of paradigms and shifts for the disaster management, it is still seen that the gender-based acts have not been passed, and the government, it needs to look for more gender-based acts and response facilities. As I mentioned before, Nepal lies in a fault line. This is why it has a lot of vulnerability to the disasters. For example, since Nepal lies in the major fault line of the Indian subcontinent and Asian subcontinent, it has the highest risk for earthquake, as we all know about the 2015 earthquake itself. So flood, landslides, earthquakes, fire, droughts, glacier, lake outburst, flood, and avalanche are one of the top most disasters that occur in Nepal. And according to the survey done by the NDRM, Nepal is the 20th top most disaster-prone country in the world, with 4th ranking in regards to vulnerability to climate change, 11th in regards to vulnerability to earthquake, and lastly, 30th in regards to vulnerability to floods. Moving on, as Professor Deepthi and Vihanga already explained how women have been more prone to the risk of disasters. In the context of Nepal, the attributes to creating much more risk and vulnerability are the livelihood activities. Since they already explained this a lot before, I will not be explaining too much. So yeah, basically explaining livelihood activities and domestic work burden. They are more engaged in agricultural activities. That is why they have this agricultural activities along with the domestic work. They have to cook, they have to clean, they have to look after children, they have to look after their cattle. This is why they have a lot of work burden, which is why they do not get chance to, sit with people and talk about any other topics. The only time they get to talk is when they are actually working with other women in the field or helping each other. And during that time, they will not be talking about any issues like climate change or anything, because they have rarely any ideas on this. And gender discrimination. So Nepal had a very low literacy rate a few 10 years ago. Right now, it has increased to be 60%, but still a lot of 40% are still illiterate, and they do not know a lot about these disasters and how to mitigate, how to respond when actually a disaster hits. Next one is changing climate patterns. We all know how climate change has been affecting all the people, all the areas worldwide. And in the case of Nepal, like I mentioned before, a lot of people are still dependent on agriculture. But if the climate change has been affecting their agriculture production, then that means they will have to find another way to generate income. This is why the male will be going out of the houses. They will be going out of the country for generating income. And social norms, a lot of rural areas still do not let women to take part in discussions or even let them go to school or, have a say when making decisions. This is why these women, they do not know a lot of things on how to work on disaster management or just be careful on their own hygiene. So summing up these all attributes, what we can see is that out-migration of men has been the major reason for the increasing women's vulnerability to disaster in Nepal, since men are out of the houses most of the time when the disasters like earthquake occurs. The females and the children are the ones to get hit, and major impacts are seen in these people. So I will be talking about two different case studies. So first one is from the Oxfam in Nepal. They had the CBDRM going on back in 2008. So Oxfam has been working in Nepal for 40 years already. So they have these three interconnected programs: resilience and climate justice, gender justice, and WASH and water governance. So their main program was women's empowerment centers. Now let's move. So women empowerment centers were established in 2008. It is a major component of Oxfam in Nepal's community-based disaster risk management, where 42 women groups with 30 participants each were there. And this program actually helped develop women's leadership with the disaster risk management, which actually contributed a lot in disaster risk reduction and mitigation program. So what did the WEC do? So first one is protecting agricultural land. So like I mentioned before, since outmigration of men was a very vital problem in the rural areas of Nepal, these women were left alone to look after their fields. So they were taught how to create the embankments in rivers so that they can protect their agricultural land. And then they were taught to lobby against the disruptive practices, such as, the practices that have been going on for not letting women to work outside the house, not letting women to take part in decision makings. And these women had their own groups where they had created community funds that were used for emergency management, or they would be giving this funds to the people who actually need it. For example, if a woman needed money to get to the hospital for delivery, they will be giving this money to the woman. Next one is identifying vulnerable members of the community. So these women would be taught to make posters, and these posters were pasted in the main entrance of the house, where they would be giving symbols to where the pregnant woman was, where the house had a disabled person. Next one is raising awareness in good WASH practices. So I will not be explaining this a lot as it has been mentioned in the previous presentations. And last one is sensitizing cross-cutting issues. So like I mentioned before, they were taught to identify the vulnerable groups. So they were also taught to sensitize cross-cutting issues like creating a inclusion for HIV/AIDS people or any other disabled people in the community. So next one is a case study from the nuns of Druk Amitabh lineage. So this is a bit different from what we have been talking. So Druk Amitabh nunnery is founded by Gyalwang Drukpa, and it is an 800-year-old Buddhist sect. It is situated in Druk Amitabh Mountain, Kathmandu, which is also known as White Monastery. And there are now 300 nuns who are aged from 9 years to 60 years old. And all of the nuns have jigme in front of their names, which means fearless. So jigmes, they have been changing stereotypes. How? So the leader, like I mentioned his name before, he has been promoting women empowerment following his mother's footsteps. And the nuns are put in leadership roles within the nunnery itself. And they are encouraged to take part in religious rituals, which was actually forbidden in the religion itself. And Mahamudra, which is the highest form of teaching, was taught to nuns before the monks, so that the monks would be sent to the nuns to ask for the classes. This is how the power dynamics had shifted. And the nuns were given education. They were given classes on English and other related subjects, and self-defense training, which is Kung Fu. And Kung Fu is a prohibited lesson for nuns in the Himalayas. And these nuns are the only nuns in Himalayas who practice Kung Fu, which started back in 2010. And they go through intense training, which starts from 3 a.m. in the morning, and their day ends at 11 p.m. at night. And because of this, the nuns feel that they have improved their self-confidence and they have learned self-defense. Moving forward, these nuns have been helping a lot in working as community activists, promoting gender equality and environmental sustainability. Along with the community healthcare, they provide health camps and also they work in rescue and relief. Moving forward, they also have been taking charge in a lot of places where the mains are expected to be there. Nuns are just seem to supposed and assumed to be staying in the monastery, you know, going to rituals and chanting some mantras. But these nuns, they went to rescue and response activities when the country was hit with 2015 earthquake. They also they also participated in the pandemic, where they were providing relief materials to the people in need. So these nuns, they actually walked, not in vehicles or going in helicopters. They actually walked with all the instruments and equipments in their hands. And they reached the areas where a lot of NGOs were not able to, because the area was rural. And they have been working for environmental conservation as well. So they have done Eco Padyatra. They work with Leave to Love organization, and they also work with Waterkeeper Alliance, where they actually make sure that these Himalayan regions people get a proper supply of water. And back in 2017, they went and gave self-defense training in Ladakh, where the area had a very high news reports on girls getting sexual harassment and rape. And they also did bicycle yatra against human trafficking, which was a cross-cutting issue in Nepal after the earthquake and the pandemic. So why did I choose? Okay, sorry. So they have won 2 awards, very big awards: Asia Game Changers Award 2019 and the UNESCO Martial Arts Education Prize in 2021. So the reason to choose these case studies was that, as you can see, that these 2 communities, women, they come from very different backgrounds, but they have, despite having the contrast, like these women from Oxfam case studies are living in a community, whereas these nuns are having their own community away from the community. But what their empowerment has taught is that they are going and working for a convergent outcome, that is women empowerment, and they are working for the mitigation and risk reduction for disaster. So this is it. As we all know, prevention is better than cure. We can see that if the women are taught, if the women are given proper education that is needed in time, regardless of the age they are in, regardless of the area they are in, they can be a very crucial component. They can contribute a lot in empowering the women, benefiting the community, and again, being a very important component for disaster risk reduction and mitigation. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ashmita, for your presentation. These 2 case studies about women empowerment are very, very encouraging for women all over the world. So thank you. Our next speaker is joining us from India. Debolina Roy is a project associate at the South Asia Alliance of Disaster Research Institutes, SAADRI, headquartered at Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, India. Over to you, Debolina, for your talk.
Hello everyone, am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, hello, I'm Debolina Roy. So I'll share my screen. Is my slide visible to everyone?
Yes. Yes, you can see.
Okay, so today I'll be talking about the role of women in India and how they are successfully moving from scarcity towards sustainability. In India, we are currently celebrating the 75 years of independence, and the women since independence have been struggling to uh, improve their status in the country. And women from all levels of the society are now coming forward to contribute better towards India's development. Women in India, they are taking a lead in contributing their um decision making in the governance as well as in the implementation. So, as per the based on the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, it necessitates that at least 33% of women at the local government shall be women. And at present, there are 44% of the elected seats in the local government ruled by the women. And we can also see from the graph that the participation of women in the election is also increasing gradually. Women to be leaders and lead the country towards development, education is very important for their empowerment. And we can see from the graph here that more women are choosing for higher education. Also in the primary schools, more girls are enrolling. But in the upper primary, secondary, and senior secondary, the situation is pretty much stagnant. But the government is taking initiatives. For example, the National Education Policy and Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan, which which promotes more gender inclusive education in the country and provides all the facilities needed for the backward communities and girl children for inclusive environment in the schools. And the more educated women will mean that in future more women can participate in the workforce. At present, we can see from the graphs that women are participating much lesser than men in the formal workforce. We can also see from the bottom graph that women are spending more of their time in India to pay unpaid activities as compared to paid activities. The government has been promoting the National Skill Development Policy and training through a network of industrial training institutes. And they have also made provisions in labor codes which enables women also to participate in the workforce. The Indian women have the unique quality of empathy, humility, and inclusiveness, and they can communicate with the women and children who comprise a large population of the society. And they are contributing successfully in balancing the water, energy, food nexus. They are balancing out this integrated system through their contribution. So I'll give a few examples where Indian women are contributing significantly in their communities. So water is an essential element, and women are primarily responsible for collecting water in their households in India. And that's why they face a lot of challenges when there is scarcity of water in their region or in cases of drought. So I'm presenting here a notable example of Jal Saheli, which literally means water friend. They are empowered women who are now capable of managing water, and they are also technologically empowered themselves, and they can install and manage the hand pumps in their areas. They have revived more than 200 water bodies in their villages, and they are working in more than 300 villages in the Bundelkhand region. The second example is from Bhumru, Gujarat, where um, a group of women have come together with support from an NGO, and they are using the technology of water water storage in the ground, where they can use a small area where they can store the groundwater through a pipe. And this has been significantly helping these farmers to sustain their agricultural produce during the water crisis. Similarly, the women from the Man Taluka in Maharashtra, they are also fighting the drought with support of an NGO through a community-led approach for tackling the water crisis. In terms of sustainable energy, India is moving gradually but slowly towards the use of sustainable modes of energy. Here are two examples, one from Gujarat and another from Rajasthan. In Gujarat, the women led by Self-Employed Women Association, SEWA, which is an NGO, and they are empowering and training thousands of women, and they are teaching them how to use the solar panels and how to maintain them. Similarly, in Rajasthan, they are training, they have already trained more than 2,000 women how to install and maintain the solar panels, and they are being called as solar mamas. Now, if we talk about the sustainable food production, here I'm presenting a story of a woman from the southern state of Telangana in Sangareddy district. With the help of Deccan Development Society, the women have grouped themselves together in sanghams, and with the help of the NGO, they are practicing sustainable agriculture practices in their villages. Uh, they have grouped themselves together against the climatic and environmental conditions in their villages, and over 2,700 women farmers have reclaimed their farmlands and practicing a biodiverse agriculture. This has led to increased food production, and their lives have also improved. They now have 80% of the members now have a concrete structure with proper roofs. They have also created their own media. They have shared their stories through video creation. Although these women were non-literate women. Another woman who is leading in terms of sustainable agriculture practices is Padmashri Trinity Sayu. She is from the state of Meghalaya, from West Jaintia Hills. She is a part-time teacher. She is a teacher and part-time farmer, and she realized that the Lakadong variety of turmeric will be more economically viable for the region, considering the heavy rainfall that Meghalaya receives. So she started practicing this. She started cultivating Lakadong turmeric, and in future, the women from nearby villages and her own villages came together, and they have formed a self-help group, and they are cultivating this Lakadong variety, and this has improved their economic condition. Indian women are also starting to go towards entrepreneurship and innovation. Many schemes in India have been launched to encourage women for innovating new ideas and products. For example, the Science and Technology for Women, Science and Engineering Research Board Fellowship. These are a few schemes and programs by government which encourages and provides a platform for leading this entrepreneurship drive in India. The MSME sector in India is almost contributes to 30% of India's GDP, and MSME has been significant for women to bring their innovative and entrepreneurial skills to the front. Now, the gender disparity and discrimination acts as the hindrance for the women's development, and the lack of education, overburden of work, the patriarchal society norms, and safety and security concerns often lead women to let women to move forward. But through the strong willpower to bring change, the women in India are now moving towards the change. They are spreading education amongst themselves. They are gradually getting more awareness of their rights. They have more exposure to the outside world, and they can share their stories and information through the social media and internet connectivities. They are also leading to through the technological innovation. And all of these are possible with a strong basis of policies and schemes that the Indian government is providing. So all this provides a strong ground for women to lead towards sustainability. Here is the list of references, and thank you very much for listening. Over to you, Dr. Nimra.
Thank you, Devanina, for your presentation on the role of Indian women in sustainable development. Some of the examples you gave are very interesting, and women all around the world can follow this. So for our last speaker for the session is joining us from Auckland, New Zealand. Ms. Deepthi is a PhD candidate at the Auckland University of Technology in New Zealand, and her research area is focused on ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. She would be talking about the 3 months in field Sri Lankan flood stories. Over to you, Deepthi, for your talk.
Thank you, Nimra. Can you see the screen and can you hear me clearly?
Yeah.
All right.
Both.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Deepthi, a PhD student at Auckland University of Technology, and I introduce myself as a basic woman. So yeah, my presentation is about perspectives of women regarding ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction in Sri Lanka. So this is, I will put this to, okay. So this is the outline of the presentation. I will give a brief introduction to ecosystem-based DRR, methodology, research methods, results, and the acknowledgements. So ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, we talk a lot about ecosystems and the importance of ecosystems in reducing disaster risks and climate change effects. So there are 4 advantages that we get from ecosystems. They are like provisioning services, cultural services, supporting services, and regulating services. These regulating services provide disaster risk reduction, which is the topic of interest of us today. And in 2012, there came the Millennium Report, and in Millennium Report, we realized and we understood environmental degradation as one of the driving factors of disaster risks that we are facing today, because environmental degradation increases the potential of natural hazards, and it also increases the vulnerability, and then it reduces the capacity. This is not an equation, but we know that disaster risk can be defined as hazard into vulnerability divided by capacity. That means when the hazard and the vulnerability increases and the capacity is reduces, disaster risks increase. So by conserving, protecting, and sustainably managing ecosystems, we can reduce the potential of natural hazards, and we can decrease the vulnerability, and we can increase the capacity. So we can say that conservation, protection, and sustainable management of ecosystems lead to reducing disaster risks. But as everywhere in the world, and as it is in disaster risk reduction and as it is in ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, at the moment, most of the decisions are made by the DRR experts and policymakers that we introduce as the external stakeholders, and local people, those who are almost in the problem, those who are almost facing the risks, they don't get the chance to participate properly or to make decisions. So my research is all about thinking how we are going to combine these physical scientific approaches and community-based approaches for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. In physical scientific approaches, the flow of knowledge is from experts and policymakers to local people, but in community-based approaches, the flow of knowledge is from local people to DRR experts and policymakers, which is bottom to top. And in physical scientific approaches, the flow of power is top to bottom. That means it flows from experts and policymakers to local people. But in community-based approaches, the power flows from local people to DRR experts. So this is quite contrasting, and I'm going to look through my PhD and think how we are going to effectively combine these two for effective and sustainable management of ecosystem-based DRR. So these are some of the examples that I take for ecosystem-based DRR, especially Bangladesh. We don't have a speaker from Bangladesh today, but that's fine. During the worst monsoon, Bangladesh get flooded, like 2/3 of Bangladesh get flooded. So in Bangladesh, the government and NGOs and other people tried different mechanisms and different approaches to fight these floods. But one of the best approaches, which is an ecosystem-based approach, came through suggestions and knowledge of local people, including both men and women. So that is a little background to ecosystem-based DRR. And now I'm moving to Sri Lanka, where my research was conducted. In Sri Lanka, we face different types of hazards and natural hazard-induced disasters, and among them, the worst is floods. And my study areas are Ratnapura and Kolonava. Why I selected Ratnapura is still a rural area, or we can say it's semi-urban, but Kolonava is not like that. Kolonava is populated and highly urbanized. So I wanted to take two sides which has different socio-economic and cultural parameters that I can compare and see how people, including women, respond to the idea of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. So the data collection was conducting used participatory methods. There were 63 semi-structured interviews conducted with local people, including both men and women, and there were 4 focus group discussions, and there were 27 key informant interviews. So I'm going to show you some images of semi-structured interviews that were conducted. So I would like to tell you something, because my presentation is all about sharing my experience that women shared with me, women's experience that they shared with me. So if you can see this lady who is wearing a pink t-shirt, by the time I went to the field and by the time I went inside a house, her house had flood water. And she had one bed, her bed was flooded, and she was just looking at me and asking, where am I going to sleep tonight? This lady that you see wearing a dress with flowers and black flowers and white flowers. So she looked at me and asked, you talk about ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and disaster risk reduction, the only thing I think about is how I'm going to provide dinner to my kids. So I just want to mention, consent was observed verbally to take their photos and to put them, to use them in presentations. It's just in black brackets. So this is in Ratnapura. So this is myself interviewing people, both men and women. And this is again in Kolonava. And these are several images of focus group discussions that were conducted in both Ratnapura and in Kolonava. So these the key informant interviews were conducted through Zoom, because by that time I was in New Zealand and I didn't have access to my field sites. Okay, now we are going to start the most interesting part, the results. So ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction is gaining attention as a global concept to reduce disaster risks. But according to my research and according to my findings, people's perspective, women's perspective on ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction highly changes and varies based on their socio-economic and cultural factors. So all respondents, all women from Angamana, Bambarabotua, Salamula, and Singapura, these are the 4 sub-areas of Kulanav and Ratnapura, they all identified ecosystems as playing a major role in disaster risk reduction, and they identified ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction as the way forward. They also agreed that the role of wetlands in flood management and forest in landslides were the best disaster risk reduction mechanisms for like floods and landslides. They also identified that the destruction of ecosystems, wetland filling, wetland encroachment, and forest clearing as main contributors to increased disaster risks in Ratnapura and Corona. So using this slide, what I want to say is that women, they understood and they have the knowledge that ecosystems are playing a major role in disaster risk reduction, and they understood really well that they know really well, they are aware that the destruction of ecosystems is a main contributor to the increase in disaster risk reduction, to reduce disaster risk. But what people told me, the perspective of people about implementing ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction was totally different to this slide. Like, it was totally different to what they know and what they understand. They know that we have to go for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction approaches, but they don't want to implement them. So there are some stories behind why they don't want to implement them. But before that, I will tell you, like, respondents from Angamana. This Angamana is a rural village, and women and men living in this region, they have resources. They have access to like home food, like they have what they want planted at the backyard of their houses. They are very unique with their neighborhood. So for them, they said that they agree ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction as the best solution, and they also said that they would 100% contributing to ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction if implemented. Local people of Bambara Botua, they had a different idea. What women of Bambara Botua said is that they understand that ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction is the way forward to go, but they didn't give their consent, or they didn't like implementing ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction because according to them, the environmental conditions, the ecosystem conditions doesn't suit ecosystem-based approaches in Bambaraputo, because what the women said me was that if you plant a tree, the tree will fall down after some times when the root system reaches the water table. And I was like, okay, fine. And then I went to the scientist, and then I went to NBRO, and then I had my discussions with these people, and I realized that local women living in Bambarabotu were 100% correct. They had the knowledge. This knowledge had not come from books, but this knowledge had come from experience. So what I want to highlight here is our women, both men and women, those who are living in our local regions, they have the knowledge. And then we are moving on to local women from Salamula and Singapore. This is where the real sad stories appear, because these women once had been homeless. So the story is, in Salamula and in Singapore, where people get flooded, the flood-prone region is beyond the embankment. Like, there's a flood bank developed to escape the Colombo city, like to protect Colombo city from Canary River floods. But these women that I worked with, their families, they are settling beyond the band, inside the wetland. It's almost the river bank. These people are settling there. So they never agreed to go to a flat. They never agreed that ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction should be implemented, even though they knew that ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction was the answer. So these women, they all are unauthorized settlers. They don't have any legal document to prove that they have the land rights. They don't have any legal document to prove that they have the land ownership. Once they had been just walking here and there on roads, having no settlements, no place to settle. Once there had been people, those who beg and make the living. Once they had been just seated where, just wandering along cities. But what happened is, when they found the right land that can match whatever they have inside the pocket, they had selected that land as where they are going to live. They had purchased it and they had settled and they had built their very poor, and how can I say it? It's like these houses do not have the basic needs that we can say that this is a house. But however, these people are living there. So I asked from them, why don't you like implementing ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction or any other disaster risk reduction approach that might need their land? What these women said me was that, look, once I was wandering here and there, and now I got here. I don't have the ownership for this land and I don't have any legal document. You are coming and proposing us for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and you say about other disaster risk reduction activities that might need our land. What will happen is, at the end of the day, we will be thrown back to the road, and we don't like any of these disaster risk reduction approaches happening here. We would rather be in flood, but not any disaster risk reduction approach. And then I asked from them, why don't you like to go to community flats? Community flats are for people, those who do not have proper land rights. So what they said was that, if there is a proposal to restore the Colombo wetland, we will be sent to Lux under 7 flats, and that's fine, but we don't want to live there because people living in the upper floor, like these community flats got like 6 stories, and this area is famous for some illegal business like drug trafficking, human trafficking, and things like that. So in these 16 stories community flats, the lift is not working. So these people have, because the drug addicts, they used to steal parts, electronic parts from these lifts and sell it and get whatever the money they can and then purchase drugs. So as a result of this, in these community flats, the lifts are not working. So people, they have to climb 16 stairs to reach the highest. So people, those who don't have land rights, women especially, those who don't have land rights, and those who don't have families, those who don't have husbands, they will be sent to the 16, and they're like, how are we going to climb 16 floors every day? And some people told me that because of these difficulties, people, those who are living in the 16th floor, used to put garbage and used to shit into polythene bags and put those polythene bags from the 16th floor to the down level to the floor, right? They just drop it from the 16th floor, and things just fall on the floor. So people, these women, they were highly against the fact of conducting any ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction approach or any other disaster risk reduction approach. What these women said were like, we would like to stay in flood, and yes, true, we get flooded 7 times a year, but still it would be better than the other problems that we have to face. So one time, so this lady gave me her consent. That's why I have the photo here. So she said me, when it floods, she said that she wear boots and cook food in the flood water, bring the food to the front and save the family members to eat, and at night gets back to the kitchen, which is flooded, wear her boots and clean and go to sleep. The next morning she steps back to the flood water, wears her boots and go to the kitchen, and she, the regular style, like in the flood, a woman in the flood wearing a pair of boots, cooking the dinner, cooking the lunch, cooking the breakfast, and still feeding the family. According to her, she is a mother and she do not have flood leaves, and this cycle sometimes repeats for one whole week, 7 times an year. And again, these women, there are like women, those who are expecting. So she was expecting a baby soon, and she looked at me and asked me a question. Her question was, should I carry my baby and should I be walking here and there with my child 7 times a year, or should I keep my baby on a bed at a flooded house 7 times an year? I truly don't have answers to the questions these people do have, because yes, we talk about empowering women, we talk about educating them, but the problem in some sort of areas in our region is real, it's intense, and it's definitely beyond what we can even imagine. I'm just not pouring like all negativities into your head, but to be honest, there was some strength that these women had among themselves. They had a sense of belonging and unity. Like, they were so united. Even when I went from one home and when I go to the next house, it's like the next house person knows what the other house person is going through, and that person is always ready to help the other women. So all women, they had this sense of belonging and they had the unity. More than anything, as I said before, they have the knowledge. They have the knowledge to give us the knowledge. But what we do is we think that they don't have the knowledge and we try to give them knowledge. We try to impose our knowledge on them rather than making them the people, those who give the education. And the other thing, they have the experience and they have their local leaders and they have their community organizations. It's like the Salamulla region is a multi-ethnic region, and we say in countries like Sri Lanka, India, and we say that there are so many problems due to different ethnicities, but no, that's not. That's something that had been created by politicians and other people for themselves to sustain in the system. According to these women, they work together and they stand together. And there are difficulties as well. These women are these women are poor, and there's economic crisis ongoing at the moment in Sri Lanka. And these people, like normally the people, those who get affected by disasters, these people are marginalized and they don't get enough attention. And there isn't sufficient infrastructure, corrupt politicians, drugs and other things, and environmental pollution. Look at this image. This image was taken by myself in Colombo of Sri Lanka. So the environmental pollution is real. So before I wind up, as I said before, the struggle is real. The struggle of women is real. The disaster stories of women are beyond what we can even imagine. And we have the solutions, but I think the solutions are within themselves. So this lady, I will never forget her. So she said me that, I asked her, why are you settling? Why are you living here in an area where you get flooded 7 times? She said me this: my ex-husband was a drug addict. My now husband is an alcoholic. If I do not put food on the table, he beats me. I'm 52 years of age. I have a son of 8 years. I have to feed him. I have to send him school. And therefore, I start relationships with men and get some money. She looked at me and asked, am I wrong? There are problems we have. Last year, the flood came 3 times, and before that, it had been 7 times. And we are like aquatic animals, but we are like aquatic animals, but it's only for 3 times or the maximum of 7 times an year. They prefer to be aquatic animals 7 times an year. Rather than stepping to the real world, they will be marginalized and they will be marginalized and they will not be considered by anyone else. So, but this one was different. The point of view was in Ratnapura was like, different. They said that the biggest issue they have is flood, but in Colombo, the biggest issue is not flood, putting food on table. So they said that the biggest issue is flood, and they would like to contribute their best to reduce floods by any approach. So what I have to tell you all at the end of the day is that world is turning towards green approaches, and world is turning towards different approaches to reduce flood risks and other sort of risks. But in Sri Lanka, we have a long way to go because we are a nation with huge environmental, socioeconomics, and cultural variations. Like every aspect of ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, every aspect of disaster risk reduction has a human aspect in that should be considered and that should be accepted. And this human accept can be taken into consideration only if we allow our women to participate in ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and disaster risk reduction. This participation should not be for ticking another requirement to secure funding. This participation should be active. So me being a woman, just like other women, I was from 2021 December till today, I was admitted to the hospital for 14 times because I'm a stage 4 endometriosis woman. So it's like I feel the struggle when there's a disaster because I'm experiencing a health crisis. So I totally understand the pain of other women, and I know that there's a hero living inside each and every woman, just like there's one inside me that would still ask me to keep going in the PhD. And however, when I go to the field, I just don't go to the field and ask what are the disaster problems you have. I just go to them, and the first question I ask is what are the issues you have. So many women in the field told me that they do not have access to sanitary napkins, and they said that that would be really great if we can organize something to provide sanitary napkins to school girls, because our school girls, they don't go to school during their period, or they just drop out from schools because they don't have access to sanitary napkins. My field assistants and women from the ground, like the women, those who work with me, those who helped me, those who were my interviewers, we together formed a group called We Protect Your Womb, and so far we have protected sanitary napkins to 3,000 girls, more than 3,000 girls for one whole year. So I feel we have to address disaster risk reduction issues, but before that, we have to make sure that our girls and our women, they have access to basic sanitary needs. So the aim of myself, and mainly the aim of the women that I'm working with, is to lift the period burden of school girls in Sri Lanka by 2025. And I hope it goes well. And these are the acknowledgements. I thank all these people listed here, my parents and my supervisors, Loic, Mike, and Deepthi. It's like, thanks a lot, and special thanks to these wonderful people, those who worked with me in the field, and my beloved field assistants, those who are again women, for going into all these very risky regions where there's human trafficking, drug trafficking, and everything. Lots of thanks to these people, and thank you so much for listening to me. And I guess together we can make a better day for our women. Thank you.
Thank you, Damitri, for your presentation. These stories highlight the impacts and the harsh realities and the consequences of climate change. And thank you for sensitizing us to these issues. Might I just ask our participants and our speakers to turn their cameras on? We just want to take a picture. Just if anybody does not want their picture being taken, they can turn their cameras off. Nimisha, would you do the honors?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for everyone to kind of switch on the cameras. One more, please. Thank you so much. We're done. Okay, so
Thank you, everyone.
We have Debalina. Debalina, did you just switch on your camera? So maybe we'll just take one more, okay? I just
Okay,
saw
all right.
one or two switching on just now. So maybe we'll, yeah. Thank you so much. We're done here. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Now you can turn your cameras back off. Lauren, can I ask you to end the poll with the second part of the poll? Can you?
It's quite interesting that we've got like 99% women, only one man, and that's Shohid Bhai. Lauren, what was the previous poll's response rate? Was it 73 or was it 76?
I think it was 76.
Yeah. So we'll wait for another few seconds to reach 76%. Maybe one or two members, that would do.
Maybe we've lost 1 or 2 members.
We've lost 1 or 2 members, okay. And I think 73% is a good enough. Very good result, very confident. That's fantastic. So we will have the results up on our special session webpage, and you would be able to see the pre and post. But I think it's very good results. So well done to all the speakers, and thank you to the participants for taking part for the poll. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you, Dr. Nivedita. For the Q&A, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Insha Malik. She is an associate professor, politics and international relations at the New Vision University of Georgia. She is also affiliated with ADN as a regional coordinator for Afghanistan. Over to you, Dr. Insha, for the Q&A.
Thank you so much. I have to say that it was really a very enlightening session for me. And I like to congratulate all of the speakers for such wonderful presentations. And because we have limited time, I will try to kind of ask a few questions, and depending on whoever feels comfortable can respond. Perhaps for the speakers from Sri Lanka, Dr. Deepthi, Dr. Vihanga, and of course, I think, yeah. So the question is basically both in terms of floods as well as in terms of resource scarcity, especially water, scarcity that we spoke of. My question is like, what are some of the programs? And I know there are a lot of developmental programs right now that many governments in South Asia are trying to focus on development and kind of pushing to improve, livelihood conditions. And our speaker from India kind of discussed that a little bit. But particularly in Sri Lanka, for example, are there any specific programs that are trying to research or implement ideas related to resource, elevating or making climate smart kind of agriculture? And if so, what's their relationship with women that, for example, Dr. Demetri is talking about how to include women's voices? And I think that's very important takeaway. Like, are the voices of people considered before these projects are implemented? Is there enough research being done? Are the needs of people being taken into consideration, if at all there are any programs like that? I'm sorry for my ignorance also, because I'm not from this field. So I want to learn from all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. And if I may answer this question, yes, Sri Lanka is a country with lots of water resources because we are a tropical country. We have enough rain. We have actually not like the other hemispheres. Sri Lanka and other tropical countries have two seasons, the rainy season and non-rainy season. We have enough rain. And in Sri Lanka, we have 103 big rivers and more than 18,000 man-made lakes or reservoirs. So we have enough water. So what is the problem there then? Even though we have enough water, water is not timely available because due to climate change, during the dry season, the water resources get depleted. So that is one thing. Secondly, the coastal region gets water, the salt water intrusion and water gets decreased in quality. And on top of this, there's huge amount of pollutants dumped to the, getting pollutants coming to the reservoirs and the rivers because the drinking water, it's taken from these rivers and reservoirs and get purified. So the government spends a lot of money to purify water. So what is the root cause of this? We think it's the lack of awareness, irresponsible activities, unsustainable development, and not having prior good plans. For instance, in the urban area, the urban expansion and population increase is happening everywhere in Sri Lanka. The cities are expanding, but nobody other than the major cities, the other cities are not being planned properly. So the expansion of activities, unsustainable activities are there, which contribute to pollution of water. The water pollution has been a huge problem in the recent past. A lot of water bodies have been polluted with agricultural pollutants in the rural areas where you get the CKD or the chronic kidney disease of unknown etiology, which kills many people. Per year, there are more than 50 deaths are happening due to this. So the water is there, but the thing is we don't have good quality water. The second thing, we don't have access to water. In many areas, the pipe-borne water is not available in rural areas. So people have to go to water sources such as the lakes. So it's mostly the women. And I don't think in these areas, women have equal access to water due to the societal constraint. They can't go during the night and things like that. So these are the problems we have. If Vihanga and Damitra could add more, please.
Yeah, it's like, yes, we have so many, we have approaches that have been implemented by different organizations and by the government itself as well. But as Professor Deepthi said, the problem is regarding managing the water resource that we have. The question is, are we managing the water resource that we have? That's a real question, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much for those answers, but also specifically to you, Dr. Deepthi. I mean, from your presentation, I was quite, and everybody I think was quite enlightened by, hearing the voices of women. It's actually quite vividly that we hear what women are thinking and kind of problems that they're facing. And in my own work, I'm kind of an advocate for women's agency, their voice, even at the local level. So that was fantastic. But also I feel that are the government projects not considering research or lengthy research enough to kind of first have, have a proper estimate of what the local people want. So you also discussed the people in light of like they didn't have land and they came and they kind of settled here. And so in the first place, why don't people have land? Like kind of like, does government take into consideration the background and the research and everything before developing projects? or is it happening in a way that it doesn't necessarily respond to the, I think that was very vividly coming out from your presentation, that it doesn't really respond to the local needs, I guess.
Yep. So actually, there's a clear question about the local needs, and what I presented to you today was the actual voice of people, the real voice of people. So when I worked with Colombo, what people said me from their words, and if I translate it into English, what they said was that you were the first that came to us and talked with us and discussed with us regarding this problem. No one else had ever come. But what the government and what the other agencies do according to the people is that they would impose their solutions on local people without considering the point of view or the perspective of the knowledge of local people. So it's something where the experts, or something where the external stakeholders impose what they know on the local people, and this has led to the destruction of local knowledge. I see it as a huge problem. And in Sri Lanka, just like in other ways, there are mechanisms that have been taken to like provide people with land, but it's like I can't ask that question very clearly because I have not read well in that subject, in that area. But as a Sri Lankan, I know that there are lots of people, those who don't have proper land rights. It's like unauthorized settlers are there, especially in Colombo, where where it's like highly urbanized, because Colombo is the city, the economic center of the country. So people try to fly there because they think that they can find better employment and better access to healthcare and education in Colombo. So as a result of that, in Colombo, there's a huge population. It's like that's multicultural and multi-ethnic and multi-religious. So it's like a complex issue, and the population density is extremely high, it's like the Colombo city can't bear the number of the people that are trying to settle there. So it's like, yes, there are people, those who don't have access to land, like those who don't have proper land rights. And the other thing is, yes, there are these community shelters, there are these community flats. Like once people are unauthorized settled, what will happen is the government will remove them from these unauthorized settlements, and they will be put into these community flats, community halls that I mentioned. But the living conditions of these community halls are way below the conditions, that's the basic conditions required by human beings, because I have visited those places and I've been with these people, so I know that well. Yeah, people's point of view is considered in many times, as long as there's this need of the tick to be put at the front of, like, yes, we consulted local communities, just to tick that they would go and consult. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So that actually explains a lot, and it's kind of food for thought for all of us to think about in our projects, how to centralize or, put more emphasis on, or how to inform government projects on development more and more about what the local needs are. So thank you so much again. I think Ashmita has left the call probably. So I have a specific question for also Debolina. I think a lot of what you presented today was quite interesting, and it's like you can see that some of the smart initiatives that India is like now using are kind of something that people, others can also learn from. However, I had questions about, like, if you, through your research, could find out what have been the challenges of, there are the success stories, but also what are the challenges still that remain in India too, because it's also a very huge country. There's so much population, and to be able to kind of like deliver at a level where you can say that it uniformly represents a picture of a country as huge as India. It would be good to kind of have a reflection on what are still some of the limitations despite these good efforts that are being made.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. Yes, thank you very much for your question. Yes, I presented here a few of the success stories where women have struggled and they have come forward with success, but they have still faced rejections and difficulties from their society, from their families and their communities. For example, when I gave the example of Jal Saheli, those women, they when tried to solve their water issue, firstly, their queries were not being resolved by the local authorities. They had to repeatedly go to their offices and they had to take the lead themselves. So there are challenges, there are oppositions for women. Then there are also safety and security concerns for women to uh, to participate in every environment. So there are challenges, but I have presented a few examples from different parts of the country where women are uh, trying their best to solve these challenges. And they have been successful in managing this resource scarcity.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's all from my side, but now the floor is open. If anyone else has questions, please feel free to come online and ask our speakers.
Insha, we have some questions in the chat box.
Yeah, sure. Let me take a look. Sorry, Dr. Nimra, could you read them out? Because I don't, I see most of them are as comments.
I have just put them on your chat box, Dr. Insha, if you can just have a look. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Oh, okay, so we have a question from Nimisha, right?
From Sari, Dr. Sari.
This is from Sari, sorry, Dr. Sari, wonderful. So this is a question particularly to, I apologize, who is it addressed to? It's for Dimitri. Dr. Dimitri, the question is for you. What are the high levels of risk with the floods? Okay, sorry, before people would consider DRR. So I think the question is more specific to floods and flash floods. And considering like what the high, I mean, you mentioned that there are local ways in which they kind of use to determine the floods, but also like what is important in terms of like how high risk floods can be judged from using DRR. So that's the question, if I didn't get it incorrectly. Dr. Sari, please feel free to also jump in if you're here.
I think Sari has left. It's like
Okay.
there are flood warning systems that have been established in Sri Lanka. So it's like people get we have a website. In that website, we get a notice in red that we get red alerts and alerts that there are going to be floods, and we have news like which is broadcasted every hour. So in this through news also we spread the message that there will be a flood, and it's like we say that now the flood level is this and the flood level is that, and it will go up to this. And we have a special news segment that we call breaking news, so people tend to listen to breaking news a lot. So through breaking news also we give the message that there might be a flash and there might be a flash flood or a river flood, and people have their own ways of predicting floods and sharing the information among each other as well. So it's like we have both local ways and we have both scientific ways to identify and to predict and to broadcast flood warnings.
Thank you so much. We have another question. It's not particularly addressed to anybody. That's from Edith. So do you think as climate change gets worse and pieces of land and cities are relinquished to flooding, for example, this will cause greater or exacerbate existing inequality, for example, pushing poorer members of society into living in more dangerous floodplain areas? So it's about the how more and more climate disasters will make poor people more disadvantaged, and particularly push them to live in particular areas more than others.
So if I may provide an answer to that, it's like, yes, the climate is changing and the climate is increasing the potential for natural hazard-induced disasters. And in my point of view, why poor people and why marginalized people are more focused in risk, like why marginalized people tend to be at risk, is because these land areas that is located in these flood prone areas and other disaster prone areas is like less invalid compared to the other places. So I think one thing from my experience is that these are the regions that local people with like marginalized people, those who can afford to. So as a result of that, they are being pushed to settle in these regions which are prone to all sort of natural hazards. Like if people have the resources and if people have the capacity to get to secure regions, they will definitely, but the problem is they don't have enough access to resources and they don't have the capacity, both financial and cultural capacities, to access lands in other regions. Like in India and in Sri Lanka, there are like this caste issue where there are like certain areas are just for some low caste people. I don't like the word even, but due to these cultural issues, there are certain areas where these marginalized people can be, and they don't have access to protected, like they don't have access to secure areas. So that is like this marginalization, this social segmentation that we have in our region, and the economic situations of these people. These are the things that highly affect and put vulnerable people into more vulnerability. That is what I can add to that question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
I can.
Yes,
I
please.
would like to add something to what Ms. Deepthi said. So, kind of my undergraduate research was based on analyzing the socioeconomic impacts of the residents in the flood river basin. So, I found that, as Ms. Deepthi said, like most of the times, the prices of the lands are very low when it comes to the local inundation area. And also another thing is that some people live in their ancestral homes, like that have been handed down from generation to generation, especially in Ratnapura area. So they do not want to leave these ancestral lands, although they are heavily flooded. So as a result, their living conditions have become poor as well. So even though sometimes the government has taken steps to give free lands to them to reside in safer areas, but still they do not want to leave. And what they told me was like only once per year a flood arrives to Ratnapura. So we can face that with our knowledge and with our capacity. So we don't want to like leave our traditional lands to a place we really don't know and quite new. So we don't want to leave our ancestors behind. So such issues as well, such attitudes also have made them push them into these marginalized communities.
Yeah, that was also my thought, because I think that most of the South Asian terrain has wetlands and non-wetlands, and it's kind of like also a little bit of British colonial legacy, because they tried to also construct land use in a way that it privileged more people at one end and didn't privilege other people at the other end. So this is my understanding a little bit, but I think I guess also it's important to, as Deepthi argued, that not only climate change, to respond to the previous question, but not what I understand is like not only the climate change, but also caste structures are kind of getting politicized again, and kind of like it's pushing back on poor and disadvantaged people a little bit more than it should. Thank you so much. We have a final comment from Dr. Sari again. And I think she's in this comment kind of resonating what we all are saying. And she's saying, thank you, Deepthi, for sharing your research stories. Your research reinforces the facts that women are parts of the solution. Women are experts in their lived experiences. Unfortunately, their views and voices are often ignored by people with economic, political power. Your research teaches us the complex challenges that women globally share, and I see similar stories in Indonesia across different regions and urban slums. With that comment, I have to say it's really, at least in this platform, I personally felt very connected with these stories, because it seems like a lot of us are dealing with or struggling with or understanding issues that affect us in kind of similar or different ways. So I think that's one of the successes of today's session. Thank you so much once again, everybody. Who is, just a moment. Yeah, so anyone else wants to add anything? If there's nothing else, that would be it for now.
I would like to thank all the speakers and all the participants for gracing this session, and very interesting talks we had. And this opens the door for many more discussions in the future, and not just discussions, actions that need to be taken. So that's all from my side. Thank you all once again. Thank you, Insha. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks.
All right.
Take care, everybody. Bye.
Take care.
Thank you very much,
Bye.
everybody. We had a
Thank you
nice
very
session.
so much.
And
Thank you.
yeah, I think we can do collaborative work, awareness sessions and other activities in the future too. Thank you very much, and good luck to all of you. Thank you.